Yeah,
Be off camera for a second
absolutely.
here.
I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in to our Sunday afternoon get together with the Suncoast Audiophile Society.
Great.
And our guest presenter, Mark Conti from MC Audio Tech. I've seen his product at a few shows, and I was thrilled that he came and exhibited at our show because I just really like his product. It's got a unique aesthetic and a really nice sound.
Thank you.
That was part of the buzz of the show, actually. A lot of people liked what you've done. So thank you for joining us, and I hope we're not screwing up your Sunday afternoon too much, but we're glad to have you. So with that,
This is what we do. I mean, I'm thrilled to do it. And again, if you get into talking to audio groups, typically Sundays are the time. So it's wonderful. I pray first and then talk to audio groups or something. But in any event, thanks for having
Sorry,
me.
pardon the interruption. Pardon the interruption. Hey, I think Lenny and Ronnie, can you mute your microphone so there's no echo when he speaks? Mute your mic. That's one.
I can do that myself as the host.
Now, with an echo, maybe I sound better. You don't know. We'll try it from there. Well, again, thank you. A nice introduction. I figured that what we would do today is I would spend a little bit of time introducing the company, introducing the approach to this and why we're doing what we're doing and how we're trying to do it. And then I would transition into a PowerPoint presentation that has mostly slides, but also as a video so that we can just take a look. And at this point, the video is my setup here, nothing from a big environment, but I couldn't get out to do much else. So that's what we did. And then we can finish with some question and answer at the end, which I suspect is probably normal for you folks. So anyway, MC Audio Tech is predominantly me, Mark Conti. I have a, interesting kind of issue in terms, or not issue, but history in terms of high-end audio. I had started a company, Impact Technology, back in the late 90s. And we did some smaller transmission line floorway speakers, and then switched to a speaker, predominantly one product called the airfoil loudspeaker, which some of you may or may not remember. The airfoil loudspeaker did get reviewed in Stereophile. Drove me a little crazy to review, but that's another subject. The airfoil was a very tall linear array loudspeaker with dual subwoofers and was quite the thing. And we sold a number of those. And then for whatever reason, that company kind of stopped. But that project at the end, the last half was done with Paul Paddock, and we'll come back to Paul in a few moments. Then I was partners in a company called Veloce Audio from 2008 to 2014. And we had some success with a really wonderful preamp and set of amplifiers, particularly because Harry Pearson, God rest his soul, decided to use our preamp for like the last 5 years as his reference and said some very kind things about it. And again, I moved on. I have some other activities in my life. And suddenly I am back with a gentleman named Paul Paddock, who's out in Oregon. And Paul has quite a history, I guess you would say. The reason that our loudspeaker is called the 4010 is because Paul has been working on these transducers for 40 years. And this particular speaker has 10 of the drivers per side. So that was his invention for the name, and I really don't much care. So there you have it. But for those of you who remember Linneum, you would probably know Paul's name as the designer of the drivers in that product. And then he did the airfoil with me, and he's had a couple other things he's worked on, etc. So Paul is basically what I would say the predominant designer of the internal stuff. And he does externals as well. I work on the externals, so I have a fair amount to do with the product look and feel, but we both kind of collaborate with this. So anyway, that's kind of an introduction to us. We are a relatively small, I would say, bespoke kind of company, meaning that we are, planning on making fewer of these products rather than thousands of these products, if that makes any sense. There will probably be a couple of other models coming, but not a full range of products from bookshelf speakers to whatever. This is a fairly specific product, mostly for 2-channel, although it could be used for home theater. And so there we kind of get into it. So why don't I try to do this and see if this works? So I'm going to click on this. And then you guys are going to hopefully tell me that you can see this at some point.
Not yet, but you might have to select what you're trying to share from your computer. Pick the application or window to share.
Yeah. Why does this tell me to install the Zoom audio device, which I shouldn't have to do? Bear with me. This has already been tested, so this should kind of work.
We see your screen. You might have to go under audio settings and have it so that you share your computer audio with us as well, if there is an audio track to this.
There is no audio track. So I tried to do this in the simplest way possible. Can you see my screen right now?
Yes, we see it.
Good. So you see me up in the corner, just so I can either wave or cringe or whatever it is I'm doing. But so this is a way for me to give you pictures of the product, to describe it and discuss it, rather than me trying to walk around and do stuff with a portable camera. It just didn't make any sense. So in any event, MC Audio Tech is the sales and marketing arm of our organization, and as such, I'll end up talking about it. I will take you to a picture. So for those of you who haven't seen it, this is a rather dramatic photograph, which will actually show up in our next website. We're redoing a website and should have it up in another month or two. It is a product that I think originally people didn't get it or couldn't understand the visuals, but I think people have come to, we get far, far more likes about how this looks than dislikes. It is, of course, not a tall speaker painted like with car finishes or finished in aluminum. It is essentially a kind of 2-box device with a riser, and it has a bit on the top and a bit on the bottom. So we'll come back to that. Let's see what happens next. I go like this, and then I think I can go like this. And what I will probably do is pause this video just a little bit and give you a sense about it, and we'll take it from there. So this happens to be my listening room, because that's what I had to work with today. And just giving you a view of the speakers and the rack, and I will stop at the rack just to give you a notion of what we're doing. And maybe right about there is a good play. What did I do? I broke it. Bear with me. Let's try this again, gentlemen. Oh, this is not, pardon me, sir, and ladies and gentlemen, what am I doing here? How do I pause this thing?
Does the pause control just play? There's pause, so you can just hit that pause at the appropriate time. We can see the rack now.
Yeah, every time I hit it, it is starting it over or moving it to the next place. Let's see.
Try maybe depressing your space key.
I got it. Thank you. You were probably right. I was probably pushing in the wrong spot. So hard to see here, but I'll describe how we're driving these loudspeakers, because this will be the one shot that will give it to you. We're using on the upper left a Wolf music server. They're from down in Florida or someplace, gosh darn it. And a turntable on the upper right. In the next shelf down, all the way to the far left, is a Vice 501 DAC. And then next to it, we'll see in greater detail is the small crossover that controls the loudspeakers. To the right is an Arion phono stage, formerly built by Mike Bettinger, who was for a while at BPI. And, you know, Mike is a very talented designer, and this phono stage is quite good. Third shelf down on the lower left is a linear tube audio preamp. And then at the bottom, difficult to see, on the left is a PS Audio, you know, power amp that drives the bass, 23 plus. And on the right is the 50-watt linear tube audio push-pull tube amp. So push-pull tube for the top and any solid state for the bottom is great. I'm using the other device. I didn't say much about the turntable on the upper side. We don't really have to come back to it. It's an Amazon, and it's 20 years old, battery powered turntable, which is not what sets it apart. What sets it apart is that crazy looking thing on the top, which happens to be one of Paul's pivoting linear tracking tone arm, which is a real piece of work. So we will proceed on here. Again, little bit of visuals, get a chance to, again, see the rack. This just gives you an idea of what kind of gear I'm using, and then I can tell you later what type of gear in general we've used. You can pretty much use any power amp on the bottom you want, as long as it's, you know, has decent amount of oomph. And we have used everything from the 20-watt linear tube audio, ultra linear on the top. 20, 40, doesn't seem to matter.
What's the sensitivity of the speaker?
Both upper and lower run around 95 dB. Again, these ratings are often, you know, there's a lot of things to look at when you drive a loudspeaker. Let me just pause here for a moment. This is very small. This is the controller for the system, particularly for low frequency. What do I mean by that? It's powered, so you do plug it in, and the rear of the device takes your input from your phono, and then based on setting the upper array, you then dial up the woofer to where it feels comfortable to you in your room, and you do that with the bass level control. So it's passive on the top, comes in, goes through a cap, goes back out. And the bottom is active in the simplest way possible. We have a level control, and then we have contour, and we'll come back later to why contour can sometimes help us out. So there we go. And on to, we hope, the next one. Oh,
So that one box controls both channels.
correct.
Okay.
Let's see if we can do that. So, you know, some overview speaker kind of pictures are helpful. This is the rear of the product. The front you've already seen in the video, and we'll potentially see that again. This is a great time to explain what this speaker is. I'm sure you're all familiar with dipole loudspeakers, correct? Well, this speaker is a dipole from top to bottom. I mean, there are effectively no real enclosures here. The upper array holds 10 drivers that basically exist in this device, where there's sound goes out the front, sound goes out the back, okay? And then the woofer cabinet below also has 2 drivers in it, and they're guided in the sense that they don't come out the side. The side pieces guide it out the front. We saw some grills on the front of the speaker, and then there's a big grill in the back of the speaker. So essentially, there's a device to hold a couple of woofers that's pretty open, and a device to hold the upper array that is pretty open.
How are the
Scale.
woofers arranged? If you have two woofers, are they both front firing or
That is
opposing
a
drivers?
that is a really good question. And if you're willing to wait for just a little bit, I have a drawing of that, which will sort of show you how it's happening. But basically, if we look in that cabinet, and you can probably see my fingers here, what's occurring is that there are two woofers with their backs almost slammed against each other that are firing sideways. So positive, negative, positive, negative. The sideways firing is being moved out the front grill, two grills, and the negative is moving out the back. Part of this is also based on a Paul Paddock patent where the grill size is slightly under what it would be to be a true open baffle. Open baffle speakers are really interesting. They can speak very effectively. They're really wonderful, but depending on what kind of woofer you use, they tend to oscillate. In other words, they have a very hard time at the micro level stopping when they should. And so this device basically has a slight bit of back compression so that the driver does not oscillate. So hopefully we can move a little forward. This is new and will go up on the website. We did not have this as a part of the original photographs, but you get to see it now. So these devices we call the WBLS transformer or transducer, whatever. These are a line source driver that is a wave driven type driver. You can call it a bending wave. That only kind of describes a small part of how these drivers work. There are 10 of them. They are identical. You will notice that they are on angles relative to one another. This is what makes this speaker work the way it works. These type of devices have almost zero vertical dispersion, very controlled. They have a very broad horizontal dispersion. And what occurs as these things are driven is that the lower output of the driver couples with every other driver to provide a really good low frequency performance. There's a typical, for instance, if you took these devices and put 9 of these or 10 of these in a row in a vertical array, which might be a common way to do it, you would end up with increased power handling, okay? But what you wouldn't end up with is any coupling between these drivers in terms of physically having the energy to play lower musical notes. So the drivers in this array couple up, so we get a beautiful broad horizontal dispersion. This speaker tends to produce what I would call realistic images in the field. So we don't hear Diana Krall as a tiny little pinpoint center point in a field because of a very small tweeter or because of the way that speaker works. This gives a broader sense of what's happening in the field with people and music and so forth. So again, I don't know if you have questions. We can get to them at the end, but this device, the upper part, goes from 100 hertz on up, begins to roll off in the low 20s, okay? But this is, as near as we know how to do it, a full range set of devices. I mean, I've literally unplugged everything, unplugged the crossover, and plugged an amp directly into the upper array, and it starts to run out of gas at, you know, probably 60 hertz and doesn't really, it's not 60, 50, it's not really effective down there. But the point is, it could be run in many regards full range. What we often have people get excited is that they think that this device is like a quad. And in a lot of regards it is, but in other ways it is not. It has to suggest that this device could be played at levels that would drive you maybe out of your room is not unrealistic. I mean, 800 square inches of surface area devoted to all the tones. It's very, very robust, very robust. Yes.
If I can interrupt, if you would double the size of those, double the number of those transducers, could that be a full range speaker in itself that would go down into the 20s?
Well, now you're asking a question like a CLS question, can it, would it, can it, would it? The answer is that something really dreadful starts to happen with low notes, which is about when they decide that not only do we want to hear them, but we also want to feel them. In other words, you've got to move air. And as lovely as these drivers are, it's very hard for them to move air. We've gotten it very, very good. I'll just say I wouldn't want to go that way with this loudspeaker. I would not. Partly when I tell you that I'm a little fussy, so I'll tell you things about me. I coveted way back when a Martin Logan, CLS, whatever, with the woofer on the bottom. And the reason I didn't buy one is that I could never, under any listening system, or listening material, say, I can't hear where the woofer crosses over. I just always heard it, I think they did as good a job as they could, but there was such a disparate nature between the upper part and that woofer that it was very difficult. When I tell you that on this speaker, I can't for the life of me figure out where it's crossed over. Just can't. Then when I tell you that there are two 18-inch Pro Sound woofers in each one of the bass cabins, and they're jammed into that space where the wood is, because where the grill is, there's nothing. Let's see, maybe we'll go to another speaker here. Oh, that's a close-up of what the drivers look like. They are extremely robust. These type of drivers in general are robust. I mean, I'm using 20-plus-year-old airfoil speakers that have a very similar kind of driver. They're rock solid. So it's not a question of you have some fussy thing that needs to be rebuilt all the time. These are dynamic drivers. They have a linear voice coil. They are dynamic, and short of somebody screwing them up when they put them together, they will just work forever. They're really quite something.
So unlike panels or ribbons, they can go loud.
Yeah, I mean, I had somebody here, you guys might know Robin Wyatt. Robin Wyatt came down, and he really wanted to listen at like 105 dB. I mean, these things play really, the upper part plays very loud. And the upper part could not in any way, shape, or form compete with the woofer. So the woofer, even at its loudest, is barely moving. They're rated at 1200 watts a driver, and they're installed in stadiums. So 4-inch voice coil, but you will never blow up a voice coil. So the answer is, as Peavy said to us, you're putting them in a home speaker. I mean, they just thought it was astonishingly weird. So this picture, which is, we're going to have this done in a very nice way, but short term, I had to do this. And my partner, Paul, is really terrific, but Paul does not use a smartphone. He does not use a computer. He does not use an iPad. Everything is drawn out on paper. So he's quite a character. And he sent me a rather raucous kind of drawing, and I sort of fixed it into this. Imagine we're looking down on top of the lower woofer cabin. This is what you see. So at the top, we see an arrow and a minus sign. That's in the back of the speaker. It's where the binding posts are floating on that grill, okay? And we can do stuff like float binding posts because the speaker's wide open. There's nothing to be contained inside, you know, so that's from the back wave of the woofer, goes straight out the rear. The front wave of the woofer shoots out the woofer sides on left and right, encounters a wall and moves forward. That's the positive signal. This is not quite as efficient as a standalone woofer in a tower that's open front and back, but it gets the benefit of a little bit of compression to tighten it up, and it's really, really efficient and plays really loud. Most of the people, I want them to love the upper part, the array, because that's where the music is. But I still end up people going, well, this is the most amazing bass we've ever heard. So there you have it. There's the crossover, which we've seen before, okay? The back is interesting. Plug controls only the low pass on the right side here. It's the only thing it does. It controls those two controls on the center and raises the level or lowers the level of the woofer and adds a little bit of contour. To the left side is where your preamp input goes in. And then for the high pass side, it literally goes through one cap and out. So it is simply a passive crossover that happens before the amplifier. So short of purchasing or having a solid state amp of maybe 150 watts, that's all you need. And why 150? Well, we just like the energy to move those woofers when they need to move. So that is that device. Binding posts. So upper one is for the array, and that comes in from your favorite, what I call the favorite amp. Your favorite amp should be for the main part, and then the lower version of this, which you can see, is for the woofer side. You have to have a way to hold the thing on the top, and that has gone through some interesting adjustments. But what you're looking at now is one of the variations, which is a cross-cut aluminum device, which we think looks cool. This is interesting in that this upper array assembly just floats on there. Two people pick it up and you hang it on the top and then let it settle, and that's it. It's not even bolted down. So we have a woofer that's about 80 pounds. We have the array, which is about 58 pounds. And this device comes fully assembled, and you put 4 bolts in the top of the cabinet, and then the array just rests on the top. A lot you can get away with when you're not making 400, 500-pound speakers. We get into some other fascinating areas here. We tested this speaker a fair amount in terms of hard floor, wooden floor, concrete floor, rugs, et cetera, et cetera. No matter how we viewed the listening experience, we preferred this speaker floating. Now, again, please bear in mind, this is not a 200 or 400 pound heavy duty loudspeaker. This is a lighter type device, and we just preferred it floating. And what you see here is what gets attached to the bottom of the speaker before you rotate the speaker into position, lift it up. And it has 2 screw holes in the center, and you take the threaded things and you just put them in till they're just snug. And you decide which you want sitting down based on whether or not you have a concrete or hardwood floor or a rug. You put the spikes down if you have the rug, you put the isolators down if you don't have a rug and have a harder floor. When you rest it, the 2 screws that hold it to the bottom essentially move away from the base. They just hang there. So when it's in the listening position, it's on 4 points. That's it. There's nothing's really touching except the 4 points. So we find the speaker works very well this way. And then we have sort of a closing picture here. So woofer at the bottom, array at the top. I tend, just to give you an idea with these things, depending on the size of your room, I like them at least 3 feet out from the back wall, and I like them angled slightly towards the listening position. Not everybody may agree with that. I like it that way. The speaker itself does not particularly like to be pushed close to a back wall. I think this will make some sense. The rear wave of this woofer, if you get it too close to the back wall, it's hitting the back wall, bouncing out, and you're getting cancellation, particularly at the lowest frequencies. So the contour can adjust for that, but the way I really like to adjust for it is to have these speakers 3.5 feet out into the room. So for those who would call up and say, I have it, but in my room, they need to sit flush against the wall in the back, I'm saying, like, that probably won't work. If somebody calls me and says, my room is not very wide, but it's pretty deep, I can have them 3 feet out from the back wall. But what happens what if I have to push them up against the sidewall? To which I say, no problem. Again, this is a really interesting speaker. I guess the best way I describe it is that these speakers, each speaker doesn't know really that the other speaker is there, and also doesn't know that the sidewall is much there. In other words, the woofers are figure 8. Sound comes out the back and sound comes out the front, but nothing comes out the side. And the arrays are nearly figure 8. So these speakers don't much care about sidewalls. Or as people tell me when I go to shows, how long did it take you to set up? So we normally allow like 15, 20 minutes, and then we go get coffee. In other words, these speakers are not speakers that you have to move a 1/4 inch to get them to sound right. They just drop in and they're great. The second thing that occurs with the upper array is, we're worried about sound bouncing off something and coming and hitting you. Well, for the most part, the upper array, the sound hits behind you. It has such limited vertical dispersion that sound is going, back and over you. So that works pretty well. So let's see what happens now. I'm going to try and see end of slideshow. Click to exit. Yes? Okay. So that's the end of that. Let's see if I can make this go away here. Pardon me, guys. I am not perfect with this. Oops, there's something else on my screen here. But anyway, what am I?
Did you want to stop sharing your screen, or do you have more pictures you're
I
trying to go
I think I want to stop sharing my screen. How do I do that? I'm not.
Should be a tab on top that says stop sharing, I believe.
It says resume share, or sharing is paused. Stop share. Ta-da! Thank you. You're helping me out here. So the reason we did this video is it's a tough product to talk about. It requires a little bit of sort of explanation about how it works. I hope I have not made it more complicated than it is. It is a speaker that can be driven mostly with very low wattage, particularly with the array from 100 hertz on up. I mean, almost any amp you would probably choose to use, except for a really low power single-ended triode, will work fine. It's very friendly and easy with rooms. I mean, it likes a bigger room. It likes more room to speak, but I mean, my room is like 17 by 20 and it works beautifully. So I guess I would ask if there's questions. I mean, anything that anybody has that's a question. This is, when you go around to an audio show and you peer in at every room, this speaker would stand out as something that is not exactly normal. And I'd like to make you feel comfortable that while it looks like mid-century modern and slightly unusual, that it's actually quite well thought out and quite normal.
Mark, I did hear your speaker at an audio show, and I mix up all the audio shows now, Rocky Mountain or Exponent. But I did hear it at an audio show, and I was impressed with it. As a matter of fact, I went back to the room a number of times to hear it. But I had 2 questions for you.
Yes.
The first question is, what is the minimum size room that you would recommend for a speaker such as this? And the second question is, do you have to buy amp? Do you have to use 2 power amps to drive this speaker?
Well, thank you. First of all, thank you for coming back. This could have been at Rocky Mountain. If you attended Capitol Audio Fest, it could have been at Capitol. It also could have been at the Florida show. Those were primarily the 3 shows that we did prior to taking this enforced break that we've taken. So the answer is, I don't know the absolute smallest room, but I tend to think that the rooms that we show in, because we don't have the best rooms, we have the normal rooms. Normal rooms we show in seem to be a kind of the smallest room I'd like to put them in. Again, in my room, I've got about 7 feet in between the 2 loudspeakers. I've got about a 8.5 to 9 foot listening distance. I've got, a couple feet on either side and 3 feet behind. And then, of course, I have some space behind me. So, 13 by 18 would probably be kind of around where I think would be a good spot. And yes, the answer is this speaker, the way this is set up, it requires bi-amping. That does not mean that there could not be other ways to accomplish this, but what we don't want to do is be, what's a good way to tackle this? If you decide that you've got a 2-way loudspeaker and it's crossed over at 2000 hertz, you get 1 set of parts you can choose from. If you have a 2-way loudspeaker and it's crossed over at 100 hertz, you get some really dramatic things happening if you try to do a passive crossover. Enormous parts, you can't always get the best parts in the world. And the other thing is, you will have to then use an amplifier that's best for both parts of the loudspeaker, meaning that I would immediately go away from the 20 to 30 watt, like the LTA ultra linear at 20 watts, or the PASS 25 watter would not be amps you could drive, because I think they just wouldn't do enough. They wouldn't have enough muscle for the bass. So we get the advantage of using wonderful high value parts on the passive part of the crossover. The downside is you need to buy amp. Now, I'm using a $1,500 stereo amplifier, and I could probably go down to the next level down from Parasound, which is like $800. In other words, the point is, we do not need, a stratospheric amplifier to drive these bass speakers. We just need an amplifier, could be a crown, could be, there's a whole bunch of ranges for there. You certainly want to have the very best on the top, and the top meaning from 100 hertz on up. That's where we're really driving the speaker. I have looked into building my own amplifier with a built-in crossover, so that you came out of the preamp and into the 1 amp, and then you pulled out of that to the other amp. But everything I touch costs more money and doesn't really solve the problem.
I also noticed, Mark, that you're running in single-ended mode. Is there any plans to maybe produce that crossover in a balanced mode?
Yes, there is. The plans to produce it balanced, we're waiting for somebody to ask that question. So thanks a lot. It is very simple to double the size of that crossover box and double the stuff that's in there and create balance, but it just will make the crossover will go from, it'll double in price or more, because it'll become a larger enclosure and we'll have to do more. And so, yes, it is decidedly possible.
I've got a question. Conversely, have you thought about making the woofer cabinet active by itself with Class D and then just have the outboard amplifier driving the top portion?
Yeah, there's a couple of interesting ways that can be done. Yes, you could put a Class D device inside there, so first of all, we could keep the crossover as is and put an amplifier inside the thing. And then we would, instead of having a loudspeaker cable run, we would have an RCA run or whatever, which doesn't really, I mean, still, I don't know that it helps you. The answer is, in other words, that we have to get a signal to the speaker and divide that signal up. And if you're using an outboard amp, I mean, the answer is that anything is possible. Whether it helps us or not is entirely different. In other words, I guess what you're saying is that you could use the crossover, like if you put a crossover in the loudspeaker to handle the Class D amp, it might give you some flexibility there. I'd have to look into that. It's, I would say nothing is impossible. I just don't know how we would, accomplish that in a way that cut down on the number of cables and didn't create issues. That's all.
Mark,
Similar-
I'm sorry, Alan, go ahead.
I'm going to say that's what Martin Logan does with their hybrid designs with the powered woofer cabinet. And they're using digital signal processing, I guess, although it's still a passive crossover. I'm not sure exactly how they do that, but just a thought.
So Mark, my comment was, now that we're redesigning your speaker from the top to bottom,
Yeah.
now I forgot my question. I'm sorry.
No,
It'll come to me later.
And I forgot the reply that I was going to give you about redesigning the loudspeaker. So let's just call it even.
Oh, so my question was, what price category are we talking about here? What do these speakers cost? So we would know, what is expected to mate with a speaker. What would be up to the same category as far as price is concerned?
That's an interesting question. This is a $35,000 loudspeaker delivered in the United States. So we pay shipping, it's delivered, it's $35,000. I think I can say with great certainty that this speaker is in a class that at least hits that point and probably exceeds it by a fair amount. It is probably not a speaker for everybody. There are people who are dedicated to multi-driver loudspeakers and that kind of, imaging sort of thing that we don't. We go a little different direction. In other words, this is a unique product, but it's $35,000, and we think that that's a fair price for this type of a product. And coming back to redesigning the loudspeaker, I think that doing a single-ended and balanced version of this control unit is not a problem at all. I think that once we get talking about sticking amps inside boxes, I mean, typically, for instance, if you were to look at potentially a woofer in a Martin Logan speaker, there's probably more than enough room to drop a Class D amp in there. The problem we run into with this loudspeaker is that, I mean, you can't really see the dimensions very well, but if you imagine two 18-inch drivers in that center section with the backs facing each other, this is a very, very well-defined speaker in terms of size. There's not a lot of extra room floating around anywhere. We'd have a heck of a time getting, Class D might be the only way you'd get something small enough to fit in there. And I still don't know how even if we had all the crossover stuff, I don't know where we'd put it. So as an example, I don't think we'd like the crossover panel on the front of the loudspeaker facing out, and there's really nowhere to put it on the back. In other words, this design, some people look at loudspeakers and go, wow, really cool styling. It's amazing how you did that. it's just, wow, it's astonishing, the design. And I said, well, you know that thing of form follows function? That's what this is. Form follows function. There's very little room for anything in here except the stuff that's in there. And it's designed that way on purpose. It's designed that way to keep it light. It's its own kind of world. And I don't know how we tackle that right now. So
let me share my screen, Mark. Let me share my screen for a moment to show you what the newer Martin Logans are doing, which could be applicable to your design. Bear with me.
We lost your audio, Alan.
Yeah, my screen is not here. Let me keep on talking. I've got to find the picture.
Well, I'll talk for a minute. I kind of like the idea of being able to choose your both amps. Amps sound different, have different dampening factors and power factors, and you're going to have to pay extra for the Class D amp inside. Why not just buy the one you want? And how many people have stuck with the same amp for 10 years?
Yeah. So what I'm looking at there that you might find a little fascinating is they've only got about 80% more open area in that driver assembly than we have. I mean, in other words, there's like no room inside our driver assembly to put anything. And where they've
what they did is there's a tray, the bottom
Yeah.
platform that the woofer cabinet rests on contains all the electronics. It actually can be detached. It's a separate compartment altogether.
Yeah, I
and
see
then
it.
feeds through to the woofer cabinet.
Yeah, I see it. It's a very, very elegant design. It would require us either abandoning the thing that's on the bottom, that stand assembly, and putting stuff down there and raising up the cabinet. We also need to be a little, well, I see it. I think it's fascinating. I don't want to make any comments on that. We can get ourselves in trouble talking about what we might do instead of what we are doing. I will just tell you that when it comes, and please just, you'll have to accept this. When it comes to fabricating this cabinet and talking about the designs and working out the upper array and doing all that, this is not very much like most loudspeakers. It's in its own kind of a world, and we like it there. Referring back to what Bart said, I mean, yes, so classic DSP. Oh God, I don't even know where to start. DSP is, I mean, I'm not going to diss it. DSP is fine, and you can put a lot of money into DSP, and DSP is great. When I tell you that I can't find the crossover on this loudspeaker, no matter how hard I look, that is a miracle of miracles, and we're doing it with an attenuator and a small contour knob, which does very little. In other words, this thing works because of how it's done, not because of what kind of technology we're throwing. And when we got into the idea of, and I've had people ask at shows, does that have DSP in it? We go, nope, it certainly doesn't. It's not where we're coming from. We're trying very hard to make this product really simple if we can. So I would argue that, well, and also Paul Paddock has some really interesting, I mean, he has multiple patents on these kinds of drivers. I mean, and in fact, there are some people out there using sort of hybrid devices that are based on a 1988 Linnaeum patent, and I mean, stuff that he did years and years ago. This is a labor of love and just a kind of a unique product on its own. I guess I'm touting it up too much, but it's really kind of special, and it's very rare to have a product that you can play at any, kind of at any level in any size room you wish. and be able to achieve those kind of sound pressure levels, and yet not be using gigantic amplifiers. And it's quite fascinating. We're hoping at some point to get a bigger room. One of the things I've discovered from audio shows is that all the big rooms sell out and they keep them forever, and we don't get a chance to get into them. So
I think AJ, one of our resident speaker builders, has a question.
okay. Sorry, my phone was beeping. I apologize. Yes?
Yeah, had you not said anything when I saw the speaker, I would have said, boy, that looks like a Lineum tweeter, because I've got a pair of those stocked away somewhere. They probably still work too. Like you said, they are pretty durable.
Do you remember what it is? Is it an LT1000 transmission line?
No, just the tweeter. I think at one point you could buy just the tweeter. I didn't
buy just the tweeters from Radio Shack. Yes,
exactly. And of course, Radio Shack had their own bookshelf version, which were quite the rage at the time. So
Radio Shack had 3 bookshelf versions. All of them were designed by Lineum. And then after they designed all of them, they found out that they were not going to be asked to make them. They were going to get sent to Asia to be made.
Right.
Which almost killed Lineum. And then finally it died from another death altogether. But
like I said, it was a great tweeter. I remember using it in designs probably 25 years ago. But my question was regarding your amplifiers. Is there an upper and lower limit for, say, example, can you use a 1,000 watt bass amplifier and a 10 watt tray? I see there's a volume control, but is there a limit to how low and how high you can go? And then the user, I guess, sets it by ear, the balance.
Yeah. So that's a very good question. I mean, amplifiers have a couple of different ratings, as you know. I mean, you can talk about watts till you're blue in the face, but generally, I'm always curious about what output dB does the thing have? In other words, how much does it output? So if you have an amp that is outputting 20 watts on the tweeter, or on the upper part, and another one that's 26 dB efficient, at the base, you're going to have more of a gap, But the answer is, right now, with all the amplifiers I've run, I've moved that knob 5 degrees, 7 degrees. So I don't think we would ever have that issue. I was using a Pass XS 250 at Rocky Mountain with the Pass XA25 on the top. The 250 was 26 dB. The 25 was like 20 or 21, and they were vastly different in power, and it only required slight movements to get us there. So the answer is, I think we can cover almost anything that we would need to with the crossover. Almost anything.
I have one observation, Mark. I know your drive is on top on your array of full range, but I've seen something similar, and I think it was a tweeter on Vapor Audio. Do you know if they use a similar design tweeter, or is that a completely different driver?
What is the company?
Vapor. VAPOR.
Is this a European product?
No, it's an American product.
I thought that tweeter was like a ribbon.
Yeah, it's a RAL. It's a RAAL. RAL tweeter is probably what you're saying. It's a ribbon, a large ribbon tweeter.
But it has those little lumps. I'm not sure if he uses that as a dispersion device.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. Yeah,
it has bumps in it, like similar to
foam
design.
There's foam at the top and the bottom, and it limits the vertical dispersion. That's what you're seeing. Those bumps.
I see. Okay.
Is he in business anymore? Didn't he go out of business years ago?
He's sort of in business. I mean, I spoke to a number of audiophiles who's still trying to get product from him, but I don't know. I think he always was sort of in business. Very erratic.
Well, there are very many people in high-end audio that are almost sort of in business.
Well, this guy's wife died in a hotel fire, and that really kind of sent him over the edge.
No.
Oh, it was a terrible tragedy.
Gary, you had a question, I believe.
Just design wise, it seems like to me, if you're just making a product that's made only for 2-channel stereo reproduction, you're limiting your market, because home theater is big now and you'd sell more speakers. Suppose that you made the upper unit a subsat system, higher frequency unit, and you sold it as a subsat system where you can buy your own subwoofer, or they can use any sub that they want, and you can put 3 across or 5 in a room or whatever you want to do. Are you married to that subwoofer as much as you are to the upper unit, and would that reduce the price any?
Well, it's a very involved question. It's a very involved question. I mean, we naturally can have interest in home theater. The question is, first of all, there are lots and lots and lots of people going after the home theater business. It is very popular. There's no question about it. Given our production capacity and where we're headed, it's not at this point the natural place for us to go. If we were to do this system, it wouldn't be this system predominantly. The first question would be, what about a center channel? Well, the center channel is a piece of cake. We can do a center channel whenever we want to do one, but we're kind of get out of the pandemic here and get back into actually having some kind of a market that we can address, you know? So, you know, we envision potentially, potentially doing at least a center channel for home theater. But when you begin to look at a speaker this scale, this probably wouldn't be what you'd set up for a home theater. You would probably want to do a more composite type device that that was a little more. I can't really put words to it. I mean, first of all, if you decided to use somebody else's subwoofer, you would be using their subwoofer crossover, which is no problem. You set it at 100 hertz and off you go. But now you still need some kind of crossover for the upper array. We would probably try, again, building a crossover into the upper array at 100 hertz. I mean, you start having inductors that look like the size of your arm,
Oh, that's taken care of by most surround sound receivers. They divide the upper and lower with sub out and upper frequencies out for all the channels. The center and the surround speakers could be a lot smaller than your left and right upper units. So
no, I believe me, I understand that.
Can somebody mute their microphone, please? There's some background noise coming through. If you're not talking, please mute.
Yeah, I was trying to play around. Todd, I know you're next up with a question, but I muted you thinking maybe it was you, but it's not.
But the answer to that question is, first of all, I have never heard a home theater processor at any level that's close to the quality that we're going to use for 2-channel. So, that kind of drives me a little crazy. And I mean, I have a Class A processor that is very good, and still, it's not at the same level. So the question is, where are we headed with this? They're mostly DSP, these crossovers. It's just, it may be safe to say that for the time being, we have interest, but that's not a part of our market at the moment.
okay, well, the main reason I asked is because I love the design of that upper unit of yours, and I wish that I could use it in a home theater setup. That's all.
Well, and that's
Todd, you're up. If you want to unmute yourself, go ahead and ask.
well, I will comment. There is absolutely no reason in the world why this system could not be driven by a home theater receiver without our crossover. You would need different amplifiers, but it could decidedly be driven that way. You would need an amplifier for the upper one no matter what. This subwoofer design may not be perfect for adding an amp to it, but if you had a multi-channel amp, you could drive one or two of these devices if you wished. So it's not impossible with this speaker. You just wouldn't use our crossover. If you had, in other words, if you had a processor out and you could choose 100 hertz crossover, which affected the upper part and the lower part, you know, it would assume that the upper part was a multi-way speaker, wouldn't matter, but it would assume that you were cutting it off at 100. You would feed the upper part 100 hertz and you'd feed the lower part everything below that. And in theory, it should work.
Mark, can we communicate with you on your website somehow?
You can. Some of the technical info on the website will be updated. There is an email for me there as well, if you'd like, or you can just write it down. It's Mark, M-A-R-K dot Conti, C-O-N-T-I, at mcaudiotech.com.
Thank you.
We will
All right,
be
Todd.
pleased to talk. Go ahead.
Yeah, by the way, Todd's a new member of the group, everybody. Say hello to Todd.
Hello, Todd.
Thanks. How you doing? Mark, quick question, if I might. Going back to stereo pairs, if we might, given the nature of the array drivers, and you did touch on a word that caught my attention a while back, imaging. How would you characterize the sound stage of the stereo pair of these set up in a manner that you believe to be proper in terms of imaging, depth, and height?
Thank you. You guys are giving me really terrific, good questions now. This is you know, discussing imaging is very hard, sort of with language remotely. You know, you're trying to put words to it. I guess these to my mind image extremely well. But if I had to discuss imaging of what I hear when I'm at a live performance versus what I hear with many audiophile recordings played back through, and I'm going to, you know, mostly talk about multiple driver speakers with small tweeters, et cetera, et cetera. I tend to find the specifics of the sound staging strong with these other kinds of loudspeakers, but I find the imaging very small. In other words, it's very pinpoint. And that pinpoint nature is not what I tend to think sounds musical to me. These speakers, first of all, have they're within a couple dB over 60 degrees horizontal. Think about that for a second. At least 60 degrees horizontally, they're within a couple dB. Meaning that when I shift around on the whole length of my sofa, my perspective to the music changes, but the sound doesn't change hardly at all. In other words, take a Martin Logan. These are exactly 100% completely the opposite of a Martin Logan speaker. There is no spot that you absolutely have to sit to hear perfect imaging. Okay? So the other thing is, like, if I tend to think that Diana Krall would be a very small point in the center with perfect imaging with a Wilson or whatever, our speaker tends to flesh that voice out a little bit more. It seems to me more real, if that makes any sense to you.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, they have a decent vertical presentation, but again, given we try to array the drivers so that you get a full presentation, both widthwise and vertical. Widthwise, you just automatically get it. vertically we get it strong, but I wouldn't say this is a speaker where you're trying to hear things happening outside the realm of the speakers and they're doing something weird. It just, I'm not describing this well enough. I apologize. Listening to them.
I think you did all right. Appreciate
Listen,
it.
I can tell you that people who sit and listen to them do interesting things at shows. They leave and then they come back. And then they leave and they come back again. I mean, I've literally sometimes had people come back 3 and 4 times, not to wax poetic or haul out, tons of cash, but to say, I listened to this and I'm back to listen to it because it sounds good, but different. And I'm trying to get my arms around why I think I like it and why it's different. I mean, this is an interesting speaker in lots of regards, and I don't want to get into strong technology, but I mean, these drivers are, the distortion goes down as the frequency goes up with the driver, which is exactly the opposite of what happens with almost every loudspeaker driver. And I mean, the other thing is they're really, really fast, but think about speed. They're fast, not just at the tweeter. They're fast. It's the same driver. They're fast all the way on down. So one of the comments we get regularly is, this thing is really, really quick in the lower mid-range. Because the lower mid-range is basically moving, the membrane is the thickness of a hair. In other words, it doesn't take much to move these drivers. They're very, very fast. So I guess all I can say is the proof of how it works is in the listening. But you could have a really, really long conversation about why it sounds the way it does based on the technologies.
I had an easier answer for you, Mark. Just tell Todd, come up to room 804 on February 13th, 2022.
Okay.
At the Florida Audio Expo.
Is that where
he's
He's
gonna
local
be?
now, so he has no excuse.
Is that the room that I had the last time?
I was making one up. I remember you being upstairs. I came up and listened, by the way. I thought they sounded great.
Yeah.
And I have a slight recollection of going up. So I think you were.
Yeah, you are probably right. I would not have been able to grab that number out of my thing without going back to look. So, yeah, it gets, and shows can run into each other a little bit. Anyway, just so you guys know, our plan is we are shockingly signed up to do the THE show in LA the second week of June. Now, whether that happens or not is a real mystery. I put money down for last year ahead of time. It got canceled. It is on, and what my decision will be is not, my decision will be, the last thing I need to do is spend more money to go to a show that nobody else is coming to. So if I look and go, man, the reviewers don't want to send anybody there, and I really think that 3/4 of the customers are not going to show up, and they decide to have it, then I will ask them to just keep my down payment and let me sign up the next time. So we'll see what happens with that. I am not signed up for Axpona because I wasn't the last time. So that keeps me out of Axpona. There is a show somewhere up in Seattle or something, which is delightful, but it came up kind of late and I didn't do that. So at the moment, I'm looking at Rocky Mountain, which seems pretty solid. I'm looking at the Capitol Audio Fest, which is up near DC, which is a fun little show. And the other advantage is that I get to take all my stuff in a truck and I don't have to fly. So that's nice. And then on to the Florida show. So we are probably not getting back in the show circuit until October. If LA happens, great. Now we will have some reviews coming. Enjoy the Music is doing this product first. No, yes, first. Then Part-Time Audiophile is reviewing the product. I have a gentleman who writes about audio for the Rob Report, who will have the product on the West Coast. So in between now and our next show, we will be having more publish stuff online. We've had a few things so far, and we'll be doing more of that. So I guess what I would say is this is the year that we're going to build off of what happened at the last event in Florida, and really hopefully make it all happen.
Sounds good. Leo, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just had a follow-up question. I think this might tie into the home theater questions, but
Okay.
or back to redefining the speaker, right, kind of question. But just wonder if you've considered separating the upper portion into its own stand, so that way you'll have a little more flexibility on placement, and perhaps maybe, like for instance, if you wanted to use one as a center speaker, you could just put it in the center by itself without a sub and so forth, right? You could play games like that if they were like separated from each other, if you will, but still present the same signature, right?
Good question. I think we've noodled around with lots of these things. If you look at that upper array, it's about 3.5 feet wide, maybe a little less than that. Could it go on a stand? Absolutely, it could go on a stand, but it would be, I think, much too large to be used as a center channel. In other words, where most the bottom of center speakers or projectors or whatever end up is, this thing would have to be sitting almost on the floor. So that I don't know about, but yeah, I mean, give you an example. I have 2 customers in the United States who are waiting for things to perk up to buy these products for these rooms where people go and listen to LPs and everything and drink and hang out and everything. One of them's in Texas and one of them's in Colorado someplace. And there's a case where they'd like to have the array up. In other words, they're bigger spaces. They'd like to have the array up and tilted down slightly. And the woofer doesn't really matter. Well, the answer is, if somebody called and wanted this array, another 5 feet or 6 feet taller and sitting on the bass speaker, no problem. At that level of crossover, there's very little chance that we'll screw up the interface between the two by moving the array up a fair amount. So we're flexible to ways where the speaker could be handled differently. We could, if somebody called up and desperately said, I love this thing, but I don't have a big room and I don't need that much subwoofer, and I don't. We're open to look at those things. This could be designed with a smaller version of this woofer that would probably neck down the lower cabinet a fair amount, and we could probably do a design similar to or slightly different than the current array size. So we have flexibility, but I think right now you can take this from me. The product we have is this product. This product will be marketed throughout the balance of this year as the product, and then we'll see where we go.
I'd like to throw out something here. I know it'll be a little bit controversial, but I use avant-garde trios in the home theater, no center channel. Charles Hurt just did a home theater in his room using avant-garde trios, no center channel. Mike Bovard, in his home theater, he's using MBLs, no center channel. None of us have any, of the 3 of us, we're all perfectly happy with the imaging we have as a lifelike imagery. When people walk across the stage, you track them visually as well as with audio.
So you are using them as left, right, and then a modified center channel. In other words,
yeah, they call it phantom, which means there isn't one. I mean, it is, and it works very well. So I personally don't understand the need in a normal system for having a center channel. Now, Martin Logan's with a very specific imagery, that's a different kettle of fish. But I'm thinking with yours, why would you even worry about a center channel? It's something else to sell, but I don't understand it from a functional standpoint.
might be able to help with that. Bart, besides having the specificity of a center channel for dialogue, there's usually a problem with the balance between center and surround in movies. And what I have to do is raise the level of my center channel relative to the surround sound in order to get the balance better. In music recordings, I take it down to the same level as the surround so that the loudness of the center doesn't change when I go from stereo to surround. So it's very important to me to be able to do that. And I don't know if you could do that without a physical center channel.
If I can comment, and anybody who wants to come back to me for even images, I mean, I'm happy to help out. Downstairs in my basement, I have a sort of funky home theater that I've just kind of put together. I've had a home theater, a dedicated home theater, for a long time. What I've run since 2003 are the Airfoil 5.1. So if anybody's got a computer and wants to look up, I mean, you could type in the Airfoil 5.1 loudspeaker. It's quite an imposing thing. And I have those for left and right channel. They're fascinated because the way the Airfoil's set up, they played through the center. In other words, they played from the outside right across the listening area and through the center. Imagine a beverage loudspeaker that almost fired at itself. And you can't set, if you're using a center channel, you can't set them up that way. You have to reverse the left and right speaker so that they don't cross over where the center channel is. But if we follow Paul's opinion on these, Paul my designer, has never had a center channel. He uses Phantom. And what happens there is that he sets them up and tilts the speakers in so that they play across each other, and will do a pretty good job with Phantom. The old Airfoils can do that job very well. I tend to lean towards a standalone center channel, even though I don't use it for music. If you use it for music, I think there may be reasons why you would even more so want to have a standalone center channel. That's my sense. But guys, I think, it's one of the exciting bits about all this is there's a lot of ways to solve these problems. And I would think with broad dispersion, with MBL type speakers, with speakers that throw a big curved sound stage, they would probably work pretty well for Phantom. And that's all I'll say.
I'd like to comment on that, Bart, just a second. I'm in agreement with you. I don't think it's very controversial at all. I think I don't really feel that there's a need for a center channel either, especially for music. I mean, I can't comment on home theater. Was never into home theater. It's not my hobby, and I don't know how home theater is recorded. Gary might be better at that, knowing how movies are recorded, which may be recorded for a 5.1 or whatever the new sort of separation is these days. But I sort of stayed in two channel, and an old friend of mine who built omnidirectional speakers, Dick Shahinian, back in the 70s and 80s, was saying there's no reason for a center channel, and he never saw the need in home theater for a center channel. So I'm in agreement with you.
I would never do a center channel for a two-channel type system. But I mean, God rest his soul. The guy who did Gas, Jim Bongiorno, was quite interested in the idea of three identical speakers, and running one of them as a center kind of field thing, which was some to left and right somehow, and did it. I listened to it a few times when he was at shows, and I didn't hate it, but it didn't rock my boat. It just seemed to me like more process. And that's the thing. We're decidedly into not more processing. We're into very, very simple, solid stuff that seems to work. And, hopefully over the rest of this year through reviews and other things, people that will get that and we'll see it hopefully coming out. But yeah, there are a lot of ways to do it. And I typically find that with a good quality center and the ability to dial that in the way I like it, I don't mind having a center channel, but I certainly can understand that other people would see it differently.
Just one small thing, if in Joe's question about how it's recorded, if you think about a vocal or an audio track in a movie, you could record that two different ways. You could have the sound in both the left and the right channel and the center channel, or in the center channel only. If a movie mix is recorded for the voice in the center only, excuse me, then everybody in the theater, no matter where they're sitting, will hear the voice coming from the center of the screen.
Mm-hmm.
If it's recorded in left and right channels and there is no center channel, then you got a problem.
Well, the center channel anchors the sound for a broader audience width, but they're clearly not a home theater focused design. I think we can all appreciate that and respect that. I want to get a few more questions in here because I see Phil and also Ronnie is waiting patiently with a question. Sorry to cut you off, Gary. Phil is asking what the dimensions of the subwoofer cabinet are.
About, 24 by 22 by 20.
And Ronnie, you have a question? Ronnie Tar, you have a question? You can unmute yourself though. Ronnie, you're muted. Can't hear you.
Yeah, I was trying to unmute me on the wrong way. One thing I'd like to say, well, I got a couple of things I want to say, but the first thing is, as far as home theater, if I turn my TV on without listening to my stereo speakers, they just sound, it's just like nothing compared to all I have to do is turn on my the speakers that I listen to, and it's like 100 times better than just listening to the little speakers that are on the TV itself. So, I mean, I'm just tickled to death. Now, I've had audiophiles over that stayed after a meeting and they were listening to watching my TV with my stereo speakers, and they were looking around for speakers behind them that weren't there. I mean, they couldn't believe that there wasn't speakers behind them. But anyway, getting back to the biamp situation, and the amplifiers for biamp. I've been biamping for over 30 years, and I just love the way Mark has got his speakers set up where you can change your amplifiers and go through a low pass filter. I've got two old Dalquist LP1 or LP10 crossovers. One of them is highly modified, and the other one, with really good parts. And the other one has, just the cheap parts that came in the crossover. And the difference just through the low pass filter is unbelievable. I mean, one just sounds 100 times better than the other one just by the good parts in the low pass filter. So, and then, anybody that's uses a tube preamp on the top, they've got tremendous upside by being able to roll tubes and completely change the sound just by rolling tubes. Or and then other ways, just changing amplifiers a lot of times will give you 100 times better sound. So I think,
and again, in some cases with tube gear, it's very linear, but in some cases it's not. And people will say, well, the tube amp is a great product, but it's not quite as good on the low end. Like I even had, Nelson Pass was asking me about the 25, and he said, well, how do you feel that it performs in the lowest frequencies? And I said, I can't answer that question. It's crossed over at 100 hertz. I don't play it to the very lowest frequencies, you know? I suspect it was probably pretty good, but you know, it's again, you get a chance to mix and match a little bit. And as far as what you said about parts, there is just no substitute. I mean, today we have access to really, really, really good parts. And I don't care anybody, somebody comes back to me with a 40-year-old amplifier and said, this is the greatest thing in the world. It still has in it parts that were effective at that time and less effective now. You know, just the world has changed. So I don't know if that helps.
AJ?
What are the impedances of the top and the bottom? Is there like a minimum impedance that you would want to choose an amp that can drive at least a 4 ohm load?
That's a really good question. So I'll tell you a little tiny bit of history with this thing. The designer decided on his own early on in the product, and didn't really share a whole lot, but shared a little bit, that he decided that he would do a network on both the upper and lower speaker. Are you familiar with a Balun network? Yeah. So this product had, you know, networks on both of the speakers, both the upper and lower. And of course, this got us into some fights with some other people that we were talking to about how you would deal with this. But I guess I would say it's an option if you wanted it. We are not including it now. Part of the reason we're not including it is that a passel of parts on a board in front of both sets of upper and lower devices is kind of not what you really want if you're going really simple. In other words, I took them out, we had testing, and the speaker sounds better without them. They're very tight anyway. The upper array is 4 ohms, probably dropping off to maybe 3.5. Doesn't really rise very much. The woofer will be 4 ohms, almost complete until you get to the very lowest registers, in which case the impedance will rise slightly as you go down. Another reason sometimes where the contour can help. We didn't really need it. But the answer is, in the old version, they were 4 ohms plus minus a half ohm. In the new version, they're probably 4 ohms plus a half minus 1. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, so pretty much any amplifier that is suitable for 4 ohms.
Yes,
should work.
if you can try, if you can, you know, again, these things are not a challenge for amplifiers, just not. You can put as big an amp as you want, you just turn it up however you want to turn. But for lower powered stuff, the only concern we would have for the upper array is, you know, 8-10 watt single-ended triode. We've just not tried it. I mean, I'll be really honest. We've just not tried it. It might work, it might not work. What it might work is it might work in a small room if you don't listen to really raucous stuff, but then you'd run out of gas. And for a while, I ran the 20 watt LTA on the upper part and the 50 watt on the woofer. But it didn't take me long to try a direct comparison with that, what is it, the 23 plus from Parasound and a couple of other solid state amps to go, you know what we're missing? We're missing that drive. You know what I mean? We're just not getting quite the drive. The tube amp has a beautiful sound, but it's not, the starting and stopping is not quite as good. So we've just kind of said, hey, we'd love to see a solid state amp on the bottom. You buy this speaker, you can put anything on it you want. But, you know, our sense is that an inexpensive solid state amp for the bottom is terrific. And then, boy, pick and choose for the top. I mean, and, you know, people are very prejudiced. I had 2 gentlemen from Linear Tube Audio up here. We've showed with them a couple of times. They came in, I played the system for them. They said, well, we're sure it's really good, but I just can't listen to it with solid state gear. And I mean, like I had the past 22 preamp and the XA25 running the upper part. And as far as the guy was concerned, that's like so terrible that you couldn't possibly listen to it. You know, and I'm like, you know, guys, get a life.
A lot of
By the
folks
way,
are-
I'm from Philly, so if I speak too plainly, I apologize.
Never too plainly, Mark. Never too
What?
plainly.
Never too plainly. But I'm going to guess that you didn't come from Florida.
New York.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Love it. Too funny. Any other questions? I will make an announcement, given where we are and how we're doing and the fact of the pandemic and everything. Once we open up, in other words, we're going to go to shows. So that's a given. But the second thing that's going to occur is while we're casting about to find the future for our company in terms of size and space and where we're going to be, I am available to have demos here in Philly if anybody, for any reason, comes this direction. Now, you may not, but if you decide you want to hear the speaker, I'm open here. I've had many people, both in and out of industry, come here, and you're welcome to if you wish. Questions and comments are always fine. And if you want us to build a particular, totally different version of this speaker, what I would say is send money and send a fair amount of it.
Perfect.
It looks very interesting.
That was
I'm
a
looking-
joke, but not completely.
Hey, Mark, I would be more than willing to, foster home a pair down here in South Florida, and any members of the club or any other residents, could come over and listen to them for free at any time.
Really?
Not a problem.
Count
The
me
way
in.
things are going, what may happen is you'll get me and the speakers, and then you just, all I need is a small wing. I don't need a lot, it'd be.
And Mark, you are direct sales only, correct? No dealer network, just direct sales?
Yes, I will. I don't know if this is the place to do this, but we're direct sales, okay? Now, we do have a program where if somebody is in the industry, and I don't mean just like a member of an audio group, but if somebody has a situation where they have access and can be an influencer, then we can work with them in a couple of ways. One might be a slight discount in price, and another one might be if you wanted to bring the product in for some period of time and lots of people and really want to demonstrate it, then if a product sold, you would get a small margin or something on it. So we're direct, but we have a little bit of flexibility in that directness. And that's not brand new. There are other people that are doing that as well. We're in a little bit of a wacky world with dealers and where all that is going, at the moment. So
I got one question. Where are these manufactured? I presume locally and domestically?
That's a very good question. These speakers, I do much of the metal work and other sundry things, crossovers and so forth here on the East Coast. And then just to make this completely great between my partner and I, we figured that if he lives in Oregon and I live here, that would be just perfect because we'd be, not close to each other. Sort of a joke. Anyway, most of the woodworking and assembly is done in Oregon, and I do a lot of the metal work and crossover work here. I have some experience in that. So it's a bi-coastal thing. This speaker at the moment is only available in North America. Now, that could potentially change for, Canada, for Mexico. At the moment, it is certainly not changing for other spots in the world just because of issues like CE and all this kind of stuff that we're just not in a position that we can tackle at the moment.
Shipping worldwide has gone absolutely nuts. With the pandemic, shipping has just gotten, things are now 4 times what they were last year. 4 times.
I know, but again, that didn't affect us, and that we had decided that we weren't doing that anyway, just because of what, where, and how. And again, these things can change as we get re-ramped up to do this, because we were very ramped up to do it a year or so ago, and we were taken aback as many were. So I hope that, I hope I've given you a good idea of where we are on this.
Thank you, Mark. I enjoyed your speakers in the past, and I look forward to hearing them again.
Oh, thank you so much. And you will, what I would suggest to any of you, if you want to be on our list to get information like email or whatever, you can check the website, but also if you wanted to go on and just say, thanks, good to hear you talk, and give me an email address, we won't send that anywhere, but we'll use it for our own communication if you wish us to.
Excellent. We'll share your email address or the website with everybody. And
Okay.
I'll make a copy of this video. We'll edit it a little bit, put it up on our YouTube channel. I'll send you the link where you can download it as you wish, Mark.
Oh,
Like
that
I
would be
said, we
wonderful.
keep it private.
Wonderful.
We have
Any
a
final
YouTube channel?
questions,
I didn't
or
even know we had a YouTube channel. We have a YouTube channel now?
where do you think all those videos are that are posted? That are posted, yes.
I
Feel
know
free to-
Bart made one for the show, but
Yeah.
How the hell do you
And
meet the
again, we
decency
have
standard?
on our website, we have a white paper on the transducer, the upper driver transducer, and we also have an overview of the entire loudspeaker itself. Those two documents are pretty short, but really reiterate a lot of what I've just told you. So if you thought you remembered it and then can't remember something, if you go to the website, you can just click and download either one of those white papers.
Mark, thank you very much. And